There are places where the land no longer feels like land, where fog drifts like breath from something sleeping deep beneath the soil, where you stop to tie your boot and realize the sound of the world has vanished. No birds, no wind in the leaves, not even your own steps. In southeastern Massachusetts, there's no brochure for the Bridgewater Triangle, because those who know enough to speak plainly choose not to speak at all. Between the towns of Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown, there's a patchwork of woods, bogs, and winding dirt roads older than memory. Ask 3 locals where the Bridgewater Triangle begins, and you'll get 3 different answers. None of them wrong. Each of them afraid to be too right. It is not marked by signs. You won't find a map that outlines it. The coordinates shift slightly, year by year, like the land doesn't want to be pinned down. What defines the triangle is not shape or size, but absence. Absence of sound. Absence of direction. Sometimes, if you're not careful, the absence of you. The trees grow close together. The ponds don't ripple, even when wind passes overhead. Hawks fly over without circling. Meat ants swarm in impossible spirals around long dead stones. In some areas, even GPS falters, the blinking dot of your location floating just a little to the left of where you truly are, like your own shadow can't catch up. Locals don't rush you when you ask about it. They don't yell. They nod, maybe, or chew their cheek and change the subject. But now and then, someone like Elmer Gibbs will speak. Elmer is 78. Grew up just outside North Abington, near the cranberry bogs. He remembers when all the roads were dirt and fences were mended with patience, not nails. If you ever go past the hollow, he says, voice dry with years and cigarettes, you notice the woods are too straight. Not in shape, in feeling, like you've been walking the wrong direction inside your own mind. He leans back in his chair whenever he talks about the triangle. Not like he's relaxing, but like he's trying to put space between him and the words once they're out. It don't do to say too much about it. He taps his thumb against the porch rail. Rules stick when they're said out loud. To the land. To you. Elmer still owns the family property, though no one farms it now. A screened porch rests above the bog, and across the way, a line of pine trees marks the edge of what he calls Old Hollow Country. That's where his older brother walked one morning in 1965 and never came back. He told Ma he was running snares, Elmer said. Told me he'd be back in an hour. Took the red whistle with him. Never used it. A week of search parties. A month of prayers. The trees gave nothing back. No trail. No signs. No goodbye. People told stories. Maybe he ran away. Maybe he fell in. But the townsfolk stopped offering theories quickly. Especially when the dog they sent after him came back with its fur turned white at the muzzle and a limp it carried through the rest of its life. Since then, Elmer hasn't stepped past the bent pine at the hollow trail's mouth. You leave some places alone, is all he says. The area surrounding the triangle carries its share of documented phenomena, glowing orbs floating above marsh water, massive winged creatures striking trees in silence, voices calling names from opposite ends of a trail. Some old colonial texts mention a thin place where the pines press close. An early Wampanoag oral tradition warned of spots where the spirit of the land did not sleep. But these stories never feel like campfire tales, they feel like weather. Something that simply is. Something you adapt to. Young children are taught not to count trees on dusk walks. Windows facing the swamp are never locked, but never opened. And if you find red cloth nailed to a tree, you keep walking. You do not touch it, even if the wind is calm. Even if you swear you just saw someone up ahead, out of step with the trail. These aren't urban legends. There's something older. Rituals not born of fear, but of respect. There was a time the land and the people shared breath, says Mae Dorrell, the town archivist in Rehoboth. We've just forgotten how to exhale. Mae inherited the town records from her grandfather, and she keeps them in the original wooden cabinets beneath the municipal building. Dated but maintained. Inside are worn letters from colonial settlers describing nights where fire forgot to bring heat, and sketches of spiral patterns cut into snow where no footfalls were found. In one letter, a teenager wrote in 1902, "There are paths where the wind walks ahead of me and I am afraid to follow." Another, dated 1948, "We teach our children the rules without ever writing them down. You must not walk after the third call. You must not name the shape it takes. You must not whistle unless you wish to be answered. So the triangle has never been abandoned, but it's rarely greeted. You can drive around its edge and see towns like any small New England countryside: bakeries, churches, post offices, high school baseball fields. But turn off the main road, follow the faded chalk arrows that children sometimes draw on paved driveways, and you'll find the paths that weren't made for people. You'll notice how quickly the silence finds you, how things at the corner of your eyes seem just a moment slower, and how no one else is there, even though your instincts say you're not alone. There are places the map forgot, not because they were never named, but because those names were taken back, swept out of the mouths of people who once lived too close, and whispered now only in rules. Not commandments, not laws, just agreements. Ways of walking the land without being noticed, without waking what might be dreaming beneath the soil. Ask Elmer again about the triangle, and he'll squint out at the pond behind his porch. It don't care if you believe in it, he says. It don't need your belief. It just needs you to forget your place. And some people forget. Some arrive unknowing, focused only on quiet and space, and unknowingly step across lines not drawn on any map. When Ellen Meyer and Jonas Callow moved to Rehoboth in early spring, the land was still waking up. The trees were bare, frost clung stubbornly to shadows, and the evenings were quieter than they expected. They had been searching for space to breathe, to write, to be unseen. Life in Boston had become loud, too fast, and too much. So when the Hebron House listing appeared, 4 acres, a century-old farmhouse, low asking price, they didn't hesitate. They sold what they didn't need. Packed 2 cats, 5 boxes of books, and 3 pots of rosemary. Drove south with the windows down, feeling, for once, like they were heading towards something lighter. The realtor didn't say much about the area. He mentioned wetlands protection and historic zoning limitations. Not enough to raise concern. Truthfully, they were charmed by the overgrown yard, the leaning orchard fence, and the sunken shape of a forgotten garden buried in ribbons of ivy. It was quiet. That's what they wanted. The first few days passed in a haze of unpacking and small repairs. Broken gutters, rotted porch steps, an attic door that refused to shut all the way, but it was theirs. In the first week, Ellen noticed the silence. It wasn't peaceful, it had weight. The kind of quiet that makes you hold your breath without realizing. They stopped mentioning it out loud for fear of sounding paranoid. But one night, as they lay in bed, Ellen whispered, "Do you hear nothing?" Jonas opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling. No frogs, no owls. He nodded slowly. Not even wind, he said. It was mid-April, and the air should have been full of noise. But the woods around Hebron House were still. Not just without sound, holding it. By the second week, small notes started showing up in their mailbox. Scraps of torn paper. No return address. The first read, "If you hear your name from the trees, don't answer." The second, "Don't count the stones near the well." Jonas thought it was a prank. High school kids, maybe. Ellen wasn't so sure. The notes weren't threatening. If anything, they felt like advice. Still, they laughed about it over coffee. Their old friends in Boston would have found it quaint. 2 burnt-out urbanites collecting handmade ghost stories in a drafty farmhouse. They didn't laugh for long. One evening, Jonas came in late, cheeks flushed, boots muddy. "I found a trail," he said. "It just appears past the north edge. I swear it wasn't there earlier." Ellen was stirring soup. She paused. "It's flat," he said. "Really flat. Trails always rise or bend or slope, right? This one didn't. Bare ground. Smelled like iron." He described it like a dream. How the trail looped left in slow curves, always banking inward like it was spiraling. And every 10 or 12 steps, a strip of red cloth tied to a twig or thorn. Worn. Faded. Not quite new. "There's care to it," he said. Like someone made a point of marking it, but didn't want it too visible. Ellen furrowed her brow. "Did it lead anywhere?" He hesitated. "It just kept going. Like I was being invited further, one careful bend at a time." That night, Ellen dreamed of cloth unraveling in water, long trailing threads dragging through fog. She woke with her hands clenched tight around the sheets. Jonas was up before dawn. The next note appeared that morning, folded neatly in the mailbox like a letter from a friend. "Avoid the spiral trail. If you start walking, don't finish it." Jonas chuckled when she showed him. "Now this is getting interesting." Ellen didn't laugh. At the general store that afternoon, while paying for canning jars, she asked the old clerk behind the counter if he'd ever heard of the spiral trail. The man stopped bagging, slowly looked up, said nothing. Then, quietly, "Split rail fence, north line?" Ellen nodded. He gave the smallest shake of his head. "You ain't hearing frogs, are you?" "No," she said softly. He slid her change across the counter, eyes lowered. "If he's counting, tell him to stop," the clerk whispered. "You mustn't count the clearings." Ellen hadn't told him anything about the trail, or the cloth, or Jonas's habits. She left the store with a chill in her ribs that didn't leave all day. That evening, while Jonas was in the shed, Ellen walked the north line. She didn't go far, just past the fence, under the crooked branch that looked like an elbow. Enough to see the beginning. The trail was there, bare earth, pressed down not by boots, but something older, like many feet had forgotten how to leave prints. Something in it felt wrong. Not overtly. No heavy presence, no flickering lights. Just wrong. She turned back. At dinner, Jonas barely touched his food. He kept glancing out the window. "Everything's too still lately," he said. "The trees don't even move when it rains." Later that week, Ellen found a series of stones in a crescent near the back porch. She crouched, counted them aloud. 1, 2, 3. She stopped, blinking. Had there always been more? Her mind fuzzed just slightly, as if her memory had paused mid-sentence. Ellen stood, shaken. When she tried to tell Jonas, he didn't look away from the window. "They watch in gaps," he said softly. "Between numbers. Between sounds." There was no more mail after that. No more notes. Just silence. And the deepening understanding that the trail wasn't finished with them. The first note may be a kindness. The second, a warning. And after the third, the silence becomes the only answer left. In the Bridgewater Triangle, warnings are not demands. They're not shouted, and they don't come with urgency. They come softly, as though trying not to spill something older than language. It is said, as plainly as anything else in this place, that you only get 3 warnings. No more, no less. The first is a courtesy. The second is a plea. The third is a final mercy. After that, whatever waits in the woods is considered your business, and no one else's. Jonas received his first warning from the trees themselves, though he didn't see it that way. The red cloths, strung along the spiral path, were not playful markers or forgotten trail flags. In local folklore, they're boundary threads. Soft fences placed gently by hands no one admits to seeing. You do not touch them. You do not follow them. But Jonas, of course, had already unwound one, removed it from a branch, pocketed it, and brought it home. At first, it was nothing. He placed it in a bowl on his writing desk next to loose change and a blue glass marble. But over the next few nights, Ellen noticed his sleep deepening into something strange. Not rest. Not dream. Each night, he muttered softly. Words with no shape. Numbers, perhaps. Repeating the same rhythm. 1, 2, 3. Long pause. 4. Then silence. As if even in sleep he sensed it was not safe to go further. The second warning came as a human voice, old and earnest. Ellen had signed up to volunteer at the Grange Hall's spring cleanup. She wanted to know people. Wanted to settle in. Perhaps, deeper down, she wanted context. For the quiet, for the trail, for the cloth. An older woman named Ruth took her hand gently while sweeping dust from the coat room. Thin, pale, eyes the shade of washed denim. She pressed her fingers lightly into Ellen's palm. "Tell him to stop counting the pine markers," Ruth said. Her voice was low, clear. "You mustn't count them." "How did you?" Ellen started, but Ruth only offered a thin smile. "If he remembers the 4th clearing," she added, "he's gone too far." She let go, didn't speak again. But Ellen noticed her hand trembled after. The next morning, Ruth was found dead in her garden, kneeling as if in prayer. The police called it natural causes. No marks, no wounds, just a peaceful, sudden collapse. But Ellen knew what she'd seen, and she couldn't forget the way the old woman's words felt weighted. Not like a threat, like a burden she had handed down. Later that week, another parcel showed up on the porch. A brown wrapper tied gently with rough twine. No return address. No stamp. Inside, Ellen found a folded cloth map. Old. Yellowed. Hand-drawn ink. Faint enough that many of the lines barely showed unless turned against the light. Across the surface were hand-sketched trails. Paths through woods both familiar and warped. Some curved gently, like natural bends. Others spiraled, like snares. Next to certain trails, small notations. Don't answer if the wind speaks twice. Turn back at the third crossing. Do not move the markers. They are not for you. At the map's edge, a faint red symbol Ellen didn't recognize. A circle, bisected by a single line, one half shaded black, the other filled with pale strokes that looked almost like teeth. The symbol was pinned near the edge of the Taunton River trails, near Dighton Rock, and Hannah's Bight, where Jonas had spoken of walking not long ago. When she brought the map inside, the bowl on his desk was empty, the red cloth gone. Ellen didn't ask. That night, Jonas didn't return inside until well after 1 in the morning. His boots were dry, his face pale and sharp-looking in the porch light. "I saw the end of it," he whispered. "What end?" He paused. "The spiral," he said. "It closed on itself. But I didn't step in." She noticed his hands were clenched. When he finally opened them, the cloth was there again, folded delicately, pressed flat like parchment. "Do you remember how to get back?" Ellen asked quietly. He looked at her like she hadn't spoken English. "I wasn't gone that long," he said, blinking, even though the wall clock showed nearly 6 hours had passed. They didn't sleep that night. Every floorboard seemed to breathe. The house had always been old, but now its age felt alert. Conscious, Jonas stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror past midnight. She stood behind him. He didn't speak, but he touched the corner of the glass, gently, like checking for heat, then whispered, almost involuntarily, "What if silence is a kind of waiting?" The town didn't send another warning. No more notes in the mailbox. No knocks on the door. No fleeting glances from neighbors at the farmer's market. Only absence. The kind of absence that meant people had said what they could, and that what came next would not be helped. Ellen, now holding the map tightly folded in her coat, didn't return to the spiral trail. But Jonas began to walk nightly, the cloth always in his pocket, sometimes in his hand, moving deeper each time, almost reverent. On the 1st of May, he left without saying where he was going, didn't answer his phone, didn't come home for breakfast. Ellen waited until 12 past midnight, then sat on the porch alone. She did not call him. She did not go after him. She simply lit the lantern and hung it by the open door. One last memory of warning, one last kindness the land might understand. But where he was walking now, the rules were different. Older, made not for protection, but for balance. And balance does not grieve who it weighs. Jonas walked before dawn, when the grass held frost, and the only sound was the brittle rhythm of feet between stones. All he carried was a faint smile, and the red cloth, folded neatly like a kept promise, in the chest pocket of his coat. Ellen didn't follow him. Not this time. Not yet. She stood at the upstairs window, the edges fogged with breath. Her coffee stayed untouched. Below, the treetops barely moved. The sun rose too slowly. And Jonas was already gone from sight. He made his way north of the creek bed, past the crooked fence, and into the split hollow, the place marked on Ellen's map where the trail doubled inward. The spiral path. It was always there now. No longer a hidden thread in the woods, but a constant, patient and visible, like something that knew it was being watched. Jonas spoke little at home now, but Ellen noticed he was humming more. Soft humming, wordless, rhythmic like walking, like circling. She had stopped asking if he remembered doing it. The red cloth had changed, too. It no longer felt like cotton. There was a weight to it. Not heavy, but present, like something inside it needed to stay folded. Locals refused to speak about that path. Those few who acknowledged it at all used indirect phrases. The bending trail that loops wrong. The place you shouldn't watch too long. The one that invites. No one claimed to know who had laid the red cloth markers. Short, weather-worn strips tied to branches, stakes, sometimes even pieces of iron pressed into the dirt. Some theorized hikers marking a forgotten trail. Others claimed the land did it itself. But the rule was the same. If you didn't put it there, you don't touch it. And you never, ever follow it past the third curve. Red cloth holds things, said Mae Dorrell, the local archivist, when Ellen asked. Not traps, not warnings. Threads, maybe. Threads that bind. Not just space, but memory. She paused. It's older than the town. Older than words, probably. Mae leaned in. And the spiral? It's not a place. It's a shape we're not meant to finish walking. But Jonas didn't heed that rule. By the second week of May, He had begun following the red cloth in full, step by careful step, like one studying a procession. He would leave near sunset and come back after midnight, eyes wide, but unfocused, murmuring about how it leads out and in at the same time. He didn't always know how long he'd been gone. Time feels like it goes down, he told Ellen one night. Not forward, like standing in a pool deep enough to forget the surface. He still made notes in his journal, though they were harder now to read. Pages filled with overlapping phrases, half sketches of circles and branches, numbers scribbled in the margins. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth number always withheld. Then one night, he brought something home. Ellen heard the door creak open at 2:37 a.m., lightless and slow. Jonas stepped in and went directly to the kitchen table, unfolded the red cloth slowly, carefully. Inside, a stone, smooth, carved down its center like it had been split long ago, then weathered soft again. He didn't speak as he unwrapped it, only placed the damp cloth on the wood, as if offering it to the silence between them. "I didn't take it," he whispered. "It was left for me." On the fourth bend, Ellen looked closer and saw a thin groove etched into the stone's curve, a spiral, imprecise, shallow, circling inward until it curved in on itself. She reached toward it. Jonas stopped her hand gently. Not for touching, remember? His voice was thin, delicate, but his eyes held something else now. Not fear, not awe, lilting somewhere just outside of either. The next day, Ellen found fresh red cloths tied near the edge of their backyard. Not old ones, not faded, new, brighter, thicker, still catching in the light breeze like they had something to say. Only 3, tied in a curve. She walked out and stood between them. Nothing happened at first. No wind, no sudden pressure. But for the first time since arriving, the silence sounded too dense, like layers piled silently on top of each other, like something being hidden. And in that space of stillness, she realized the red cloth wasn't marking something off. It was marking her in. She backed slowly away, turned, went inside, closed every curtain. 2 nights later, Jonas didn't come home. Ellen waited, porch light on, soup cooling untouched on the stove. No call, no text, no sound in the woods beyond the porch. Just the nearly imperceptible movement of the spiral path in her mind. That constant curve turning in on itself. She left the porch light glowing, laid the red cloth on the windowsill, unfolded, left the front door unlocked, just in case, because she remembered what the children in town had said near the library steps. If someone goes missing in the woods, leave the door open. If it wasn't a mistake, they might come back. Days passed. No sign of Jonas, not in the woods, not in town, not on game cameras. A missing persons report was filed. The search parties walked the trails he used to, and every time they neared the spiral, radio contact began to crackle and fail. One officer came back white-faced, whispering, "I wrote my name in the dirt, and it wasn't mine when I finished." She was reassigned to desk duty. No one else asked what she meant. Inside the Hebron house, the cloth remained on the table, the split stone at its center, dry now, though Ellen swore it was damp again each morning. She kept the map in her pocket, folded tight, refused to walk the trail, refused to say his name when the wind felt like it was waiting. Because she remembered the warnings, all 3, the note, the woman, the map, and no more were owed. But grief has its own rules, and love, sometimes, does not care for old ones made in silence. So one morning before dawn, Ellen stepped onto the spiral path herself. It was 5 days after Jonas disappeared when Ellen woke before sunrise with no memory of dreaming and her shoes already by the door. The house was still, not peaceful, still, the kind of hush that builds pressure in the chest. She moved deliberately, taped a note to the refrigerator. "If I'm not back, don't knock. Just leave the door open." Underneath, she added the date in pencil and one line she didn't remember writing. No 4th step. She packed carefully. A child's bell tied to a loop of twine, a string of salt and wax paper tucked in her jacket pocket, one of the cat's small toys, threaded red yarn, and the map, folded flat, spine worn from her hands. She didn't take her phone, not because she forgot, but because she'd already felt the futility of batteries in those woods. The triangle seemed to press against signal, against charge, against all modern scaffolding that anchored people in place. If you were walking in that direction, the land preferred you bare. Before stepping off the porch, she took one long breath and left the front door open behind her. That, they say, is the only way someone finds their way back, if someone waits on the hinge. The spiral path greeted her without surprise. It hadn't moved since Jonas last walked it. Same bend at the split-rail fence. Same curve beneath the pine boughs. Same moment of sudden quiet as soon as both her feet crossed the trailhead. No birds. No bugs. No wind. Just silence, thick like syrup in the air. Nature wasn't absent, it was waiting. Red cloth markers started appearing after the first curve. One tied to a stake, barely fluttering. Another knotted tight around a branch with bark blistered beneath it. She didn't touch them, only noted them. 1, 2, 3. Each like the ticking of something not mechanical. More like the pulse of a threshold. Her boots sank slightly with each turn of the spiral. The trail tilted subtly, so subtly it took effort to notice. A slow slope as though the forest itself was breathing in. Every few minutes, she thought she heard footsteps behind her. But when she turned, there was only forest. Not even her own footprint remained. It wasn't that the dirt filled back in. It was like she'd never left one. Around the second bend, she began to feel time slow. She looked up to calculate distance from shadow movement, but found nothing had shifted. The sun was stuck in Madris. Time held still in the trees, but not in her hands. Her fingers were cold now, her knees aching. Each curve wrapped inward tighter, and the sense of moving in a circle became less orientation and more trance. Her breath shortened. Her thoughts no longer aligned. She tried to count her steps. 1, 2, 3. She paused. The fourth wouldn't come. It had vanished from her brain. She knew what 4 was abstractly, but in the moment, it sounded like dust. Her mouth couldn't shape the syllable. Her feet refused to step again until she changed the count. 1, 2, 3, and then nothing. So she walked without counting, kept moving, straight into the narrowed mouth of the spiral's third turn, where the air thickened with something damp and old. It was there she found the pine markers. Long poles, carved with shallow grooves like ribs, planted in the dirt in a circular clearing. Each had red thread woven from base to tip. The clearing smelled of sap and iron. And at its center was another red cloth, this one tied tightly around the split remnants of a branch half buried in the ground. Jonas's coat lay there, folded precisely. Inside the breast pocket, the same flat stone, spiral etched into its skin. Ellen stepped forward and felt something in her blood resist. The bell on her wrist chimed once. Only once. A high, clear tone that didn't bounce anywhere, not even against the trees. It hung in air and dissolved. That was when she heard it. A voice, deep in the woods, whispering, soft, almost loving. Ellen. She did not answer. It said it again, closer. Ellen. She stood, head tilted, pulse slowing. Her mouth was dry. Above her, a soft wind stirred the red cloth. She waited, did not speak her name into the wind. Then the voice changed pitch, deeper now, and whatever it was repeated her name from behind her. Not ahead, not in front, behind. She did not turn to see. The spiral narrowed again after the clearing. The air shifted. It no longer just waited, it watched. Ellen continued walking, smaller steps, slower pace, until she looked down and found she hadn't moved at all. The trail below her was unchanged. Nothing in her periphery had altered. It led only in. She stopped. The bell was silent. She remembered then what the boys on the playground had told each other in sing-song rhyme. If you follow and forget your name, you'll circle until you do the same. 1, 2, 3, and never 4. You'll walk and walk forevermore. Jonas had passed the fourth bend. That much was clear, and Ellen understood now why the fourth step was always the limb that snapped. She dropped the salt string at her feet, grateful now for the weight, held the map in one hand, and closed her eyes, then spoke into the stillness. Please. This was not a dare. Nothing replied, but something twitched in the air. A current pulled gently, not from ahead but from her side, where the trail once curled. A glimmer between the trees, like moonlight refused by leaves. She stepped backward, then again, and then again. The spiral did not follow. By the time she returned to the yard, the sun had finally risen, the light now honest, the birds slow to begin again with distant song. Ellen stood on the porch for a long time, mud dried around the edge of her jacket. Her door still open. On the windowsill, the red cloth was gone. Folded. Taken. As if in trade. Inside, something had changed. Not objects, but gravity, maybe. She changed nothing. Told no one. They would come looking. They would not find him. But she would leave a note anyway. Placed gently between the salt and the folded map. And on the bottom, in new handwriting, I walked the spiral. I stepped back. But not everyone does. Some walk past the fourth bend and become part of what the land remembers instead of what it releases. It had been 17 days since Jonas vanished. The search had gone quiet. Ellen no longer asked questions. Every official answer given to her felt thin, like paint over rot. Lost hiker, they said. Unfamiliar trail system. No signs of struggle. But Ellen knew. There had been no struggle, not in the way they meant. Only a slow unwinding. A leaving unlike any other. The Hebron house grew quieter with him gone. Not just empty, quiet. Blank spaces in conversations, forgotten tasks half-started, soup cooling before she remembered she had made it. The cats refused to enter his studio. The windows fogged on the inside. And the air sometimes took on a faint pressure, like someone had just left the room and might return. For a moment, the grief was ordinary. Manageable, even. Until the box arrived. It came on a Tuesday at noon. Plain packaging. No return address. It sat on the porch for 5 hours while she ignored it. When Ellen finally brought it inside, she laid it on the kitchen table and simply stared. Then, without ceremony, she opened it. Inside, Jonas's coat, folded with deliberate care. His boots, clean, dry, smelling faintly of sap. The same ones he wore when he left. Pressed within the coat's inner pocket, a single pine cone, carved straight down the middle. Smooth. Untouched by time. She placed the items out slowly, trying to understand why they didn't feel returned. They were not handed back. They were released. Not for comfort. Not for closure. Tokens, perhaps. Objects displaced from one life, waiting to dissolve back into another. She kept the pine cone sealed in the cloth it came in. She did not open it again. Later, she buried it behind the house where the peonies no longer bloomed. Wrapped it in his scarf and pressed the soil back gently, without prayer. Because whatever Jonas had become, he was not something to summon. Not anymore. In the days that followed, Ellen stopped walking the yard. She didn't trim hedges, didn't check the rain barrels, didn't gather crafters' string from the clothesline. She stopped speaking aloud, and though she never said it, she could feel when others passed into the spiral. Newcomers, unwarned. The land went quieter those days. Waited with a stillness that hummed in her chest, like a breath held under calm water. Then came December. Bare branches creaked faintly. Light snow fell, but did not stay. The spiral path grew obscured, but not lost. She found herself making the same walk every morning, to the back door, to the porch, to the line where the grass met the old fence, nearest the trailhead. She never crossed it, but often, she stood there and listened. Once, just once, the air brought her a sound like the bell she'd worn that night, not ringing exactly. Returning, she stepped back, whispered his name once, received no answer, which, in itself, was mercy. In January, she sent an envelope to the Rehoboth Town Library. Inside, the spiral-marked map, a handwritten letter titled, "The Rules They Follow." She did not sign it. No return address. A note included at the bottom read, "Let someone else know, but not too well." The archivist, Mae Dorrell, cataloged the papers in a drawer marked miscellaneous, local customs, but she did not file the rules publicly. Some maps shouldn't be copied, she later said in a recorded interview. Just understood in passing. Ellen doesn't speak much now. Not about Jonas. Not about the path. She answers only what must be answered. When asked on a podcast why she didn't leave Hebron House, she replied gently, "Leaving doesn't matter when the land remembers your echo." The host paused, asked if she felt the land was haunted. Ellen smiled thinly. "I think it's full. That's all. And fullness changes what it can hold." She still writes, now and then, short letters to unnamed recipients, folded and tucked into library books no one checks out. Some contain lines from old hymns or children's skipping rhymes. Others just say, "Step lightly. Don't speak your name too loud. Don't ask the trail to remember you." And one that reads, "If something is handed back, look closely. Sometimes it's not the part that left." That spring, a man passing through town asked about the spiral trail. He stood too long at the bulletin board near Hebron Market, reading the outdated hiking guides. He said he was curious about local legends. Folklore stuff, he laughed. Just exploring. Mae saw him leave town alone with a light pack and a camera. He did not come back. The land did not offer his coat. No items were returned. But several days later, Ellen found a red cloth tied to her porch railing. Fresh. Tied in the same knot Jonas used when hanging the laundry. The same one he learned from his grandfather. She untied it, folded it once, placed it inside a wooden cigar box with no label, and did not mention it. Not to anyone. Because the spiral doesn't always take. Sometimes it gives, but never back what was sent in. And over time, people start to realize it wasn't a path after all. It was a shape. And shapes don't forget the people who finished them. The spiral, they say, was never built. No shovels. No trail crews. No settler records. It appears. It waits. And sometimes it turns inside out. Historians studying the Bridgewater Triangle tend to avoid direct theories. Not because they lack material, but because what exists refuses to behave like history. There are shapes, after all, that show up in places too far apart to be coincidence. Spiral carvings along Dighton Rock, twisted into lines that no known language seemed to claim. Limestone fossils pulled from kettle ponds curled twice. Always twice. As if evolution had learned to mimic something older. Stone rings found buried under cranberry bogs. Far too symmetrical to be natural, but made with methods long lost. When the spiral first appears in records, it's cryptic. An 1813 field journal by a surveyor speaks of a trailing inconsistency in the woods. Path turns with no need, bends gently to no end. The man became lost less than 2 miles from the main road. His final note, recovered 3 days later by a rescue party, simply read, "If I keep walking, I'll arrive where I started, but further away." They found his hat on a tree stump. Him, never. Mae Dorrell pulls an old ring of keys from her desk drawer in the Rehoboth archives. 3 keys, all unlabeled. She only uses one. It's a shape people walk without meaning to, she says, opening a cabinet marked Field Observations, undated. Inside, a child's drawing of circular paths under a moon too large, a Girl Scout handbook from 1982, with a circled entry warning troop leaders not to hike past marker 34, a cassette tape that only clicks, faintly, every 13 seconds. The spiral, Mae continues, doesn't mark territory. It invites rhythm. She turns and looks, slowly, out the small basement window. And rhythm makes people forget. In recent years, reports of the spiral have increased. Photos posted online get taken down quickly. Some are blurry, some sharp. Always of trails, trees bent in unkind directions, stakes driven into the dirt with fabric curled just out of frame. Mae believes the silence is a kind of listening. It gathers, she says. That's all. It doesn't want anything from you unless you stay too long. Then it wants you to want to stay. She doesn't whisper like the other elders do when speaking of the land. Mae speaks plainly, but carefully. She's cataloged 17 disappearances in the last 30 years tied to the spiral trail. They're not lost, she adds. They're participating. The most well-known of these cases was Charles Elroy Flanagan, a junior college biology professor who filmed a short lecture series in the woods just outside Dighton in 2007. The final unreleased video was later found in a cracked hard drive mailed to his department chair. It had no intro, no music, only Flanagan standing among a ring of trees, sweating, rambling quietly. In the background, the trees seem to lean, ever so slightly, inward. The last 60 seconds are where most listeners stop watching. He looks directly into the lens and softly murmurs, "I've counted enough. I understand now that the 4th step changes the shape of time." Then he walks beyond the camera frame, never returns. So what is the spiral? There are theories, a residual echo of pre-colonial memory. A topological trap. Some say a spatial fold where gravity remembers directions from some other time. Or simply, an inheritance. One local theory, ensigned but tucked among the library's oldest files, refers to it as the listening pattern. In a shaky hand, someone wrote, "Its form is not what matters. It's when you walk it without naming it. That's when it notices." Ellen, now months after Jonas's disappearance, no longer tries to explain the spiral. She has begun referring to it only once a year, during her October journals, which she stores in a fireproof box under the stairs. Each entry differs, but the tone remains consistent, half warned, half resigned. One note simply reads, "There's something wrong about feeling peace in it." Another, "I almost forgot his name last week." It slid right out of my mind like fog off glass. Ellen does not walk the spiral again, but she feels it still underfoot, and some nights the bells in the attic jingle without cause. "There's nothing haunting this place," she wrote most recently. "It just remembers better than we do." The spiral continues growing or shifting. Locals say the trails are not in the same place they were last year. The cloth markers seem newer. Children sometimes hum lullabies their parents swear they never taught them. And more people are following, step by step. Gentle curves into quiet nothing. Each bend a heartbeat slower than the last. What waits in the center of the spiral path remains unknown. Some say there is no center. Some believe that reaching it is what removes you. Others believe the center is not a place at all. It is a moment, a single point of undoing, when silence stops waiting and starts remembering what you are. And returning becomes a question of whether you're even meant to. And so, without tape recorders or travel guides, only the rules remain, passed from voice to voice, not crafted to save you, just to remind the land you meant to come gently. There is no sign that marks the beginning of the spiral, only the way the woods begin to listen. No gate, no guardian, just rules, passed gently, collected not in books, not on official signs, but in remembered phrases murmured on porches, between shelves, in the silences after asking too many questions. Local children learn them long before they understand them. A grandmother sweeping the stoop might mutter, "Don't count the pines after sunset." A teacher taps the window toward the tree lean and says, "If you hear your name from the woods, don't say it back." No one argues about where the rules came from. They just say they work. Or more truthfully, they sometimes work. That may be enough. Ellen's letter, the one she sent to the Rehoboth Public Library with the folded map, included a page titled, "The Rules They Follow," drawn in pencil, stitched with half-erased annotations, cross-outs, and faint underlinings, as if discovered, not written. Inside the margin, she had scribbled, "The land does not lie. It simply doesn't explain." And then, beneath, "These are not commands. They are courtesies." Written clear, beneath that heading, follow the 13. Nobody reads them aloud all at once anymore. But Mae Dorrell, the archivist, does keep a single transcript behind the counter for those who ask with the right kind of quiet in their voice. The 13 local rules. 1. Never count things after dark. Not trees, not steps, not stars. Numbers draw attention. Patterns call notice. The land adores rhythm far too much to ignore you once it starts counting with you. 2. Avoid trails that start and end with different weather. Fog where sun was. Rain on only one side of the fence. These are not changes in clouds. They are thresholds. 3. Don't pick up red cloth unless you tied it yourself. If it's not yours, it's not for you. Red binds. Red holds. Red invites things you may not want to carry back. 4. Silence means you're heard. Respond quietly, and once. Anything more is an invitation. If the woods hush, do not fill that gap with your voice. That space answered back, once. 5. Leave your door open if you go looking. Close it, and there's nothing left for you to return to. Doors are not just boundaries, they're signals. The land may notice your choice. 6. Never break the spiral mid-step. Pause, sure, but never retreat where the spiral still turns. That shape is a sentence, and you are no longer the one holding the pen. 7. Don't look for lost things after 3 days. 3 days is enough for things to be taken in. After that, they're not lost. They're somewhere else. 8. Don't walk with anyone who doesn't cast a shadow. Even familiar voices. Even known shoes. Look once. Look twice. If the sun is shining and they cast nothing, step aside. 9. Say goodbye before you pass the iron fence on Creek Road. Even if no one is watching. Even if you live alone. The land expects manners. 10. If your watch runs backward, don't fix it. Leave. Time in the triangle folds, sometimes. It's not broken. It's breathing. 11. Pine cones split without cause. Turn around. It's not the wind. It's not rot. It's marking a path behind you. Don't follow it. 12. If you hear your name whispered by someone ahead, wait. Let the name fall. Let it echo. Wait in full quiet until it passes. What knows your name may not respect it. 13. The land can forgive, but only once. You don't get a second lapse. It doesn't punish. It simply forgets to return what it was holding. The rules are not told in fear, but in memory. During town meetings, people smile at the strange folklore of their neighbors, mentioning it like old tools in a drawer nobody uses, yet no one throws out. But behind that smile is reverence. Because what the land teaches, it teaches subtly. And the spiral doesn't always need to claim the wildest, loudest ones. Sometimes it calls gently, in a still morning, in a half-step meant to be full. In the moment you count your steps and realize you've forgotten which number comes after 3. Ellen, now silent in most public spaces, still writes rules of her own. Small ones. Don't clean the mirror after 10 p.m., whistle only for yourself. Never let the cats venture past the red thread at the tree line. They're not part of any book. Not folklore, not fixed, but they're fair. Mae says the rules shift, sometimes subtle edge bends when stories adjust over generations. You can tell when they're still working, she says, stacking returns at the front desk. It's when people stop trying to make them clever. She's refused interviews in recent years. I'll help anyone carry the rules, she once said, but I won't define them. That's what gets people pulled along. Not everyone leaves this place changed. Some remember nothing. Some forget they ever walked the trail at all. But the ones who remember, who carry the weight of red cloth, the stillness in step 4, the taste of quiet before being spoken to by name, they keep the rules deep. In pocket-sized notebooks, in their bones, in their breath when fog pushes through the windows, and they feel something settle at the edge of forgetting. Because the spiral doesn't start with walking. It starts by listening for your shape. And now, if the wind is rising and the trail bends wrong and every pine seems to lean toward you, remember, you were never supposed to come this far. The land is listening, and it only remembers those who forget how to leave quietly. Some forests echo, some remember, but the Bridgewater Triangle, it listens, not with ears, not with mind, with memory. The kind of memory that outlives names, deeds, graves, even weather. One that marks not just those who step inside, but those who do so without asking permission. Today, the triangle remains unmarked on official maps. No state signage, no historical designation, just forest, just swampland, just silence curling into silence. The spiral trail remains, not always visible, but always near, turning slowly, patiently, waiting, if not for you, then for someone shaped like you. Visitors still come. Curious hikers, paranormal researchers, weekend wanderers looking to feel unsettled for an afternoon. Some leave confused. That's it. Just trees? Just bog? Just trails marked with red flags? Some leave claiming to have seen lights, to have gotten lost, to have caught a sound on their recorder that wasn't wind or birdsong. The land lets them go, but every few years, one does not return. No screams. No signs of struggle. Just a boot print, maybe. Just a shirt collar tied to a stake, red cloth hung gently from its edge. Just something folded and left behind politely, as if part of the conversation. Mae Dorrell keeps a list of names. Not official missing persons, though most are, but people whose absences feel different. People remembered incorrectly. She can recite from memory a man rumored to have moved away in 1963. Only his house was still maintained, curtains drawn, compost pile turned, never sold. She recalls a young woman who joined high school track in 1997, whose uniform no one remembers ordering. Her mother, they say, moved, but her mailbox gets federal deliveries 3 times a week. Some don't die. Some just shift, thin at the edges until they pass through the land like mist under doors. Ellen still lives in Hebron House. She does not keep curtains closed, because the spiral isn't stopped by shadows. She does not run electricity in the attic. And every October 1st, she walks barefoot to the edge of the old trail. She places a bundle wrapped tightly in old red cloth, salt, a pine needle, something Jonas once held, and one word, never spoken, always written. Then she walks backward 3 steps, bows once, and goes inside. She doesn't speak of Jonas. She speaks, sometimes, to him. And now and then, rarely, she writes to others. People who ask the wrong questions online. People who linger too long in the trailhead clearing. People People who check out the spiral-marked map from the library and forget to return it. She sends them thin letters on pale paper. Handwritten. Simple. One opened with this line: "If the land begins folding around your footsteps, stop walking like you belong." Another: "How the woods feel is how they choose to feel. You don't anchor them. They allow you." And once. If you are reading this to understand, you're already too close to being noticed. Ellen attends no town gatherings. Never volunteers. But she bakes moon-cracked bread and leaves it on the library's rear steps each Sunday morning. She has not been thanked aloud in 10 years. But the bread is always taken. On quiet days, when wind slides through bone-dry branches, some townsfolk say they hear a distant hum. Not bees. Not machines. Something lower. Slower. A kind of patient breathing, as if through soil. They ignore it as best they can. That's part of surviving here, too. Not denial. Just coexistence. One teenage girl, new to town, wandered onto the trail last spring and came back swearing she'd been walking for 10 minutes. But her sneakers had turned to tatters, and the soles of her feet were calloused like she'd been on the move for miles. She couldn't remember passing a single tree. She couldn't count how many curves there were. "I stopped turning," she said, but the trail kept bending. She had no recollection of stopping, just arriving again, back at the road, the spiral gone behind her. But her watch spun backward for 3 days after. Her parents bought her a flip phone. She rarely walks alone now. There are stories of other spirals. In other lands. Other forests. All private. All quiet. But this one, this patch of southeastern Massachusetts, seems whole. Less a portal, more a container. And those who circle too deep into its listening are remembered not with grief, but with precision. Mae once said there's no malevolence here. The land doesn't hate. She told a film student who dared ask what it wants. It just balances, listens, and when it gives something back, it's never what you expect. Sometimes it gives the part of you that didn't leave. She locked her files after that, stopped cataloging the trail altogether. What is known is now unspoken. What is found is not named. If you find yourself walking one evening in the Triangle, and the air thickens, but doesn't stir, and your thoughts begin to slow to half-step rhythm, and you feel the urge to count your footsteps, don't. Not out loud. Not in your head. No matter how strong the need. Because that's when it notices. When it begins to walk with you. Even if no one is there. 1, 2, 3. And the fourth isn't a step. It's a question the land asks back. So keep your name close. Don't reach for red cloth that isn't yours. Don't ask the land to explain itself. It doesn't warn. It only listens. And remembers. In shapes that don't need language to last forever. And if, one day, you feel the woods tip slightly against your weight, if the spiral closes in soft as breath and cold as memory, just stop. Look back. And if your door is still open behind you, step quietly through. Because not all places want you gone. Some simply wish you to leave correctly. And the Triangle? It never wanted to frighten you. It just wanted you to learn this one thing. It was never about what you believed. It was about whether you understood how to walk away. If that gave you chills, like the video, share it with someone who sleeps with the lights off, and hit subscribe, or the next photo might have you in it. Tap the bell. The next story drops soon.